Hey, everybody, this is the Angel Dog Podcast. I'm Brian. Again, this week, my guest is John Seaman, former comrade in DEA. Again, I always say every week you have to look up those acronyms because nobody knows what the hell that means today. It's Drug Enforcement Administration, in case you don't know, under DOJ, along with the FBI. I'll reserve my comment, tongue-in-cheek on that one. Anyway, John, this week, we talked about last week, John, we talked about the deception lying to the FISA court, and we went through the FISA Title I. We talked about fabrication of the ICA intelligence community assets, talked about the Obama playbook, 2016, 2017. We went through all that. This week, John is going to address the framing of Lieutenant General Mr. Flynn. Now, real quick, Michael Flynn, in his early 60s, a little background for some of you that don't know. He was spent 33 years of honorable military service, Director of Intelligence for Joint Special Ops Command, Director of Intelligence for U.S. Central Command, retired in 2014, and for a very short time under Mr. Donald Trump, President Donald Trump, he was the national security advisor for all of what, John, the 3 months, January to February of 2017?
Less than 2 months.
John will expand upon that. And, audience, I just have to say something here. You have somebody like Mr. Flynn, the Bronze Star medal with clusters. And I had to look that up. I was not in the U.S. Army chain of Medal of Honors, and which is pretty friggin' mind-boggling. I mean, you're talking, how can a man be so decorated through his career and end up in this situation? John will go into that. I just find it amazing. Generally you look at somebody's resume, and at our age, at Mr. Flynn's age, you have a career path, and generally you just don't go bad after 30 some years. Does it happen? Sure, it does. But you would see that there's some problems, especially in the military, law enforcement, some other communities. You would think that it shows early on. But anyway, John will get into that. Tonight we're going to talk about the Logan Act. Oh, my. There's something. Implemented, somewhere around 1799. It's never been enforced. John will talk about that. We're going to talk about FARA, that's Foxtrot Alpha Romeo Alpha, 1938, that this country used with the concern over the Nazi Germany and the propaganda and the lobbyists. And some of the characters John's going to talk about tonight, and these are characters in my humble opinion. Jim Woolley, talk about him. Tashina Guhar, formerly in number 2 in charge, I believe, right, John, of Deputy Attorney General. So with that being said, I'm going to share the screen with Mr. John. And John, anything from last week we want to clear up, as we always say?
No, everything's, we're starting Series 7, okay. The framing of General Flynn. We're almost at the end of this, folks. Okay. We'll get you out of your pain and no gain here at the end. We've got 2 more sessions to go. After this one of Flynn, we'll cover the rest of the overt acts, and then number 9 will be what they did and didn't do, and then we'll wrap it up with connecting all the W's and the how questions.
Outstanding. And I want to say, John, didn't you put out a Substack this week, Freedom versus Tyranny, August 23rd at 2:03? Didn't you put that
Yes,
out?
I did. I put out a Substack to the voters, to the nation here, laying out the new facts on DeVecchio. Just wanted to let everybody know from the situation of ask the major question. The FBI had this guy under espionage investigation 2010 through 2011. They verified he had connections with the Russian intelligence service. He worked for the Brookings Institute. They believed he was a possible Russian spy. He was allegedly supposed to get on a plane with his family, and then he didn't. And they stopped their investigation, closed the case. The interesting part about all this is that in March of 2013, Danchenko gets arrested on a government facility, I think on going through Greenbelt, driving under a DUI, gets arrested and gets charged. and goes to court and everything else. And so he's arrested, but nobody notifies the Bureau, or the Bureau's never notified or whatever. And the funny part, the prosecutor on the case was Rod Rosenstein, which I thought was quite interesting. So think about this, ladies and gentlemen. You got a Russian spy under investigation by the FBI, who now we know was the tip of the spear. He was the guy, the facilitator. He was the facilitator of all the information that went to Christopher Steele that went into his dossier. This is the information that went from Charles Dolan, the Hillary Clinton DNC guy that fed him on the PTAFE information, and he was also registered with the Russian Federation. So then you got DeVecchio here, a possible Russian agent, and DeVecchio, when he told the FBI, "Hey, I made all this stuff up," he's the one that fed all this nonsense to Steele, that Steele put in the dossier that went out to everybody. And so you got to ask, how does this happen? How does the premier law enforcement agency in the world, how does the premier, all these, think about this, ladies and gentlemen. You have all these agencies, British intel, Russian intel, all these intel agencies spying on each other using synclet information, electronic eavesdropping on each other through all these years and all this stuff. You got all this information, and nobody seems to bring up Mr. DeVecchio.
Wow.
It just comes up, and he happens to be the whole guy. We start a whole crazy investigation to tear our country apart for almost 7 years here under the rouge of Russian collusion, under this guy. So the information, one thing Durham did say is that the FBI, and they could never determine whether DeVecchio was a Russian intel agent. Okay, even the FBI agents in Baltimore thought he was a double agent on the thing. So let's just say, for argument's sake, he was. So if he was a double agent, you had the Russians given the information. They're the ones that gave it to Steele to feed into the dossier. So you definitely can say it was Russian disinformation. But the Russians didn't care who was going to get elected. Or from that standpoint, as you can see, that was information to hurt Donald Trump. If you were looking at from the attitude of what it was all set up about. So, but you have to start asking questions. Why nobody went to jail on any of this? How does this come about that a Russian double agent, this guy, is able to skirt the FBI espionage folks? Gets arrested, stays in country, becomes the tip of the spear with Steele, and then they get this information all out, and here we are today. Yeah. It's incredible. Now we're going to go into the framing of General Flynn, because this is what you're going to see how corrupted and how bad this really is.
Great, John.
Because this is where it all comes together at. Okay. All this stuff we've discussed up to this date is how bad that they corrupted and weaponized the National Security Agency and the tools to use against you. So that's where we're at today.
Okay, hold on, John. I think we're just a little bit ahead here. Okay, John, have at it.
Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit, a little background. I'll go backwards a little bit. As you know, General Flynn was appointed by President Obama to be the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency. It was his selection to be the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency. So General Flynn worked for that agency. When he was in the agency, he had some problems inside. He was starting to find out that a lot of the intel that they were putting together against Syria, and some of the stuff on that they discovered on Osama bin Laden with the connections with the Iranians, what was being reported and what was being put out wasn't true to the public. So you had what you call an in-house agency fight between intel agencies. And this is not uncommon, right, Brian? Goes on all the time.
Goes on all the time, every day.
Every day. but it caught Obama's ear, and so Flynn became the focal point for all Obama's anger. So when he resigned, I believe in 2014 as head of Defense Intelligence Service, that's where all this should have ended at, right?
Right.
But it didn't, because when General Flynn was forced out by Clapper and Brennan and those guys, and he resigned, okay, that should have been the total end of this. But that's where the beginning of the story, this is where all this starts at.
Good point, John.
Because as soon as Flynn left, what did Brennan do? Brennan allegedly opens up a counter or tasks his CIA guys to start monitoring General Flynn. And how do we know that that's verified, true, and accurate? Because when you start at 214 and you walk up to 215, 216, you can go to 215. You've got those reports from the Department of Treasury. I think I told you in the last podcast where you had the one lady from who was an intel analyst in the office of Treasury Control, that they were unmasking Flynn, his finances, and all this other stuff. So the question you got to start asking is, why was General Flynn under investigation by our intel agencies after he left the Defense Intelligence Service? Why was he a target of the U.S. government? Okay? Because there was no reason for General Flynn, who had an outstanding record as a patriot, had he had never showed any kind of evidence that he was a traitor or any of that kind of sort. So then you've got to go, how does this all come about? How does he become the whole focal point of Mr. Obama? And this is where it all takes off on. Because remember, we stated when President Trump got elected in November, and the first thing Obama did, he went to go see Trump, and he told Trump two people that he better watch was Putin and Flynn. Ask yourself this: when does an outgoing president tell an incoming president to watch somebody that he's appointing into his administration as a problem? I've never heard of that in my entire life. Have you, Brian?
No, it's just unbelievable. John, I got to tell you, you stimulated so many things that I had to dig and look for myself. And audience, you need to do it. How these people are held in such high regard on your tax dollar in positions of huge amount of power and influence. And then the next day we're indicting them for,
well, that's the whole thing. So let's get into the setup of this whole thing. So you have General Flynn, Trump's campaigning. Flynn brings them on as part of his team early on. They know it. And yet you have the U.S. government targeting him. We know that in April of 2016, we know that Brennan formed two CIA task force. How do we know? One of the retired CIA guys wrote an article on it and verified that that's what Brennan did. So don't take my word on it. Take the word of somebody that was there that corroborates what some of the information is. All I'm saying is this is the information I was given. This is the information, how it was corroborated. It was corroborated by somebody inside the agency who now is retired that has corroborated that that's what Brennan did in April of 2016. So again, the question I have to all the media people, all these great lawyers, all these great investigators on the thing is, how does it, General Flynn, the head of the DIA, has no criminal record, no record of anything. Why is he the target of government surveillance programs by our intelligence networks, the CIA and the FBI? Why? I mean, they've got this guy under a microscope. And I'm glad that he's got a civil lawsuit going on in Florida coming up, because if I hope his lawyers get a hold of this tape and his investigators, because these are the questions they need to start asking: is when did they start investigating General Flynn? And why did they start investigating General Flynn? And why did they start using U.S. resources, investigative agencies, or intelligence agencies to investigate a U.S. citizen?
Yeah. Hey, John, I have a question, and I didn't see it on General Flynn's background, like we're talking about right now. And I know he went in private sector for a while. Was there ever a financial ne'er-do-well investigation brought out about any of his financial dealings? Was that ever?
Well, when Flynn retired, he started a company, okay, just like everybody else, consulting companies.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where it gets into the first part of this thing, and how did they put this together? Because I always wondered, how did they charge and get Flynn to plead out to a FARA violation on his plea deal? Because they had no information of any FARA violations when they opened up the case file.
John, real quick, you want to explain that real quick to the audience? The FARA, FARA violation.
Well, it's the Foreign Registration Agent Act.
Good.
If you're representing, you got a company and you're going to represent, like for Flynn's company, I think he was working in Turkey at the time,
Right. Mm-hmm.
trying to get contracts from Turkey. And in order to do that, if you're going to represent or a foreign government, you have to register under FARA, that you're representing a foreign government. So that from that standpoint.
But prior to that point, though, General Flynn never was under any, like there's allegations now about the POTUS, and his son. About
No.
There was
not
never.
at all.
That's all I'm asking you. I didn't see anything. There was nothing prior to this.
No, I'm just going to set the FARA part up. Let's talk about Turkey. So General Flynn starts a company up. He has his son involved. James Woolley brings James Woolley aboard, who's, I think, he wants to bring on as one of the members of his company, who was a former CIA director under Bill Clinton, I believe. And so they're in talks with Turkey. And at that time in August, I believe, you had there was a guy, some cleric or whatever, that was on the outs with the Turkish prime minister, and they had the riots over in Turkey or whatever, and they wanted to get that cleric out of the U.S. back to Turkey. So they were contacting anybody in the U.S. government or all these different companies to try to see if they could somehow get this guy, do something to get him back to Turkey. And they contacted Flynn's company, and they had meetings on this. And one of the meetings was in October, I believe, of 2019. And this was reported in the Wall Street Journal and everything. And in the meeting, the allegations were, they were basically trying to say, hey, we're going to try to, set up a kidnapping of this guy and take him out of the country and whatever. None of that ever came to fruition. None of that was ever verified, that was discussed, that was said that there. But that was basically what the gist came out of it. So it was all up. There was nothing to verify that ever occurred, or that information was solid between what was discussed in there between these two Turkish government representatives and Woolley and Flynn's people and the Turkish government, whatever was discussed in that room. And it was reported in the Wall Street Journal. Woolley made comments in there, and he was present, and he said he doesn't recall any of that and in there. The funny part is Woolley and his wife, they were competing at the same time with Flynn. They wanted to get the same contract. So they met with those Turkish guys, I believe, afterwards, or contacted on there. So to see if they may have a shot at getting that contract. So you kind of have a competing deal between Woolley and Flynn, or whatever goes on inside these competing contracts Brian, as you know, on contracting.
And that was all for the most part. That's legal.
That's all. This is all legal stuff.
All legal stuff.
Nothing illegal. Nothing happened. Nothing occurred. Nothing illegal. Whatever. So that would be what that's what the whole Turkish situation was. And Woolley, in October, took all that information and gave it to Joe Biden in October. Okay. This is of October 2016. So think about it. You have the election, Hillary Clinton and all that. Woolley is also is going to be appointed to the Trump as one of the Trump team members, I believe, on one of the committees. And so you've got this guy in the middle of Trump, and here he is working both sides between the Democrats and the Trump people. So you've got an inside guy here. So this is where all your FARA information comes out at. And the reason I say this, ladies and gentlemen, why this is important. Now let's go back to July of 2016, why this is important. Okay, you had the Russians intercept the phone call from whoever on the Clinton campaign on a synclet about Hillary's plan on what they're going to do and how they're going to do Trump. The British notify Brennan. Brennan notifies Obama. And what's Brennan do? Brennan notifies Comey, and he tells Comey on an electronic communication, he instructs him to open up 4 investigations. Okay, one on Flynn, one on Page, one on Manafort, one on Papadopoulos, and that's what happens. So let's go to the FARA application, and this is where you have to ask the question at. So that's the basis of how this opening document on the FBI case opening, which is by Peter Strzok. He is the case agent. He's also the supervisor agency, and he's opening his own case, signing off on his own case on a thing, and yet it's got a designation as a FARA violation on there. Well, nowhere in the report is there any information in the basis of FARA violations. Okay? It'd be like Brian and I opening up a DEA drug case and not talking about drugs in it. Yeah. Okay? We'd be laying out, hey, we've got all these bombs, we've got all these explosives, we've got all this stuff, but we don't have any dope or any. See what I'm saying? That would be the same analogy I could give the public here. Same sort of thing. So think about it. This is what the FBI told the nation, that this whole crazy case got started by an Australian ambassador that met Papadopoulos in a bar in May over some beers, and Papadopoulos running his mouth allegedly saying that Massoud had told him that they had all Hillary's emails and broken into her server. And that's allegedly how this whole thing got started. Period. No FARA in that. And that's basically what was put into Strzok's report. So when you go back to the opening slide on the thing there, you will see the designation. So the question is why does Strzok open up a case file, and why doesn't anybody ask him why? This is what gets me, is all these investigators like Durham and Mueller and whatever. Well, what was your basis of opening up a case? We already know that Durham has already determined there was no legal predication for any of these cases to be opened, period. None. So they had no legal basis to open any of these cases, ladies and gentlemen. But what did they do? They violated the law. They did. But nobody seems to think that that's a violation of the law but me. Okay? Oh. So that's what's so interesting about this whole thing. So
that, John, I'm going to step in here and just think what the public may be thinking about this agency, and guys like Strzok and Mueller, what other investigations did they screw up in history of this country? Go ahead. I don't want to go down that road.
Well, it's just like the slide you got up now. It's got the September 19th, 2016, the Wall Street Journal article. It's got the Rutger article. They're talking about the meeting they had in there, talking about how to get this guy Gulen out of the U.S. to Turkey, and Woolsey had to be the guy to give that information to Biden's people, and they had to be the ones to give it to the DOJ people. Mm-hmm. And so then now you can see how you get that FARA side of the fence coming in at the end here a year later. Okay, on the thing. I just find it kind of incredible. Here you got a man that that was going to be part of the Trump team, Woolsey, and then is the guy that actually becomes. You got to ask the question: was he the Trojan horse put in the mix to feed the Clinton campaign on what Trump peoples were doing, to give them information to do what? To create a crime. So that's basically all I'm going to say on this. Is that's how the FAR thing comes out, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go through the next slides on this thing, because you can read these for yourself. They pretty well are self-explanatory. They'll go down the list. We'll leave these up for a few seconds. They cover everything that was discussed in the timeline on who said what, when, and where. You'll see in that in September, I told you about Woolsey and his wife. They're the ones that made the pitch on the contract to try to get the contract from Flynn's guys. So that's basically what they were doing, trying to undercut Flynn to take the contract. And when that didn't work out, you can see what happened. He fed that information to Woolsey, fed that to the DNC folks, and it goes from there. And you see all the interconnections from the wife to Rhodes to you name it on this thing. And then you've got the long history of the negativity between Obama and General Flynn on there on the thing. You've got the unmaskings of all the that happens, but the critical part is the phone call that happens between Flynn and Kislyak. Well, the question you got to ask is how did the U.S. intelligence agencies get up on Kislyak's phone? Well, they had already unmasked Flynn, so they were basically on Flynn. So that's how that all comes about. The NSA from that and the information was put out that Flynn had discussions with Kislyak about the not the reparations, but the sanctions that were put on, that Obama had put on the Russians. And Flynn said he had no discussions with Kislyak on that. Okay, and that was the whole gist of was, did Flynn go against U.S. policy, Obama's policy of sanctioning the 10 Russians, and that Flynn was trying to interfere in U.S. policy by talking about sanctions, and Flynn saying, no, I never had any discussion with Kislyak, the Russian ambassador. And that proved out to be true, according to the transcript. But however, at that time, that's what came out. That's when the transcript gets leaked out, okay? And that's when it gets out. And here's the other part of the story. And then nobody seems to want to cooperate. And I don't know why, because it would be very easy for some reporter to go out and ask the question, because here's the information. In Sidney Powell's brief to the court that she filed on behalf of her client at the time, General Flynn, she put in there and made the reference that the information that came out of that Kislyak conversation was done by this guy Baker, and she identified the Baker as a DOD Baker, not the FBI Baker. Okay, and that was in her filings. However, in double checking that and going back to my sources on this, that was incorrect. That was a mistake. It was the FBI Baker who allegedly leaked the information to the Washington reporter David Innes. And how did that all come about? Allegedly, when Baker called Innes, McFarland, who was the one of Trump's advisors working for General Flynn, was, I believe, sitting in the car with the Washington Post reporter when he got the call from the FBI agent and telling him about the Kislyak leak. And she's the one that reported it to General Flynn. Now, whether that's true or not, I have no idea. But I would think that that would be a major thing to find out. Is that is true, that it was the FBI chief counsel Baker that leaked the information off the Kislyak call. That's a felony, number one. Vice the DOD guy that Sidney Powell put into her court documents. Which one is it? Is it the DOD Baker, or is it the FBI Baker? Who was the leaker of the Kislyak information? That's the question. But the information I had is that Katie McFarland was sitting as a passenger in the car, overheard the conversation between Baker and Innes, and she relayed that to General Flynn, and that's how that all comes about. Whether that's true or not, all I can say is that's it. But this would be easy to verify by going out and asking Miss McFarland, and it would be very easy by asking General Flynn on it, one or the other, because it's really hard for me to understand that if you knew that James Baker, the FBI chief counsel, was the one that leaked the information on the Kislyak conversation, which becomes the whole tip of the spear for Flynn's framing by the FBI from this standpoint, you would think that would be a major deal. And I just don't understand why nobody sees this but me. But maybe it's just me. That's why I say that's why you need to have an investigation going back, as Newt Gingrich said last week in one of the interviews last week. He even agreed, finally saw the light, that they need to go back and start at the origins of the Russian hoax and work forward to get all this out to the public, because you have just too many of these coincidences, commonalities that are unexplained. And in my business, there is no coincidence or unexplained commonalities on this. This is either
you investigate them and find.
You investigate it and you put them to bed. Is it true or it's not? It's like McFarland deal. Was McFarland in the car with the Innes, or was she not? Yay or nay? Very simple. Flynn, did McFarland have a conversation with you telling you this? Sidney Powell, in your deal, where'd you get that information from? What is it? Why didn't anybody ask him these questions? That's to me is how you clear it up. You go back and you ask the simple 1, 2, 3 questions on this part. Okay, so let's go from there. So then you had the FBI case agent. Remember, you had the briefing. So the Russians intercept the call. They give it to Brennan. The Brits give it to Brennan. Brennan gives it to Obama. Obama directs Comey. Comey directs Strzok. He opens up 4 cases. One's on Flynn. As you can see, that's where this all starts out, on General Flynn. Then you have the briefing with Trump, with the case agent on the Flynn case in August, and that was a precept. They didn't really they weren't briefing President Trump to tell him about any Russian interference or what the Russians were doing. They just wanted to glean information on Trump's people to see what they're saying. so they can match it up on what they have to use it against them. So it's kind of crazy on what they were doing. They're using that as a precept to do a briefing to gather investigative or intelligent information to basically investigate your targets, when they should be telling Trump, hey, we got this information that the Russians are doing all this cyber stuff and whatever, and they may want to come in from these different angles, but they never did any of that. So now you can see how this thing, when people say, well, the FBI didn't know, they got bamboozled. There was no bamboozle here. Flynn was a target all the way back from 2015. We know in 2016 in April he was a target. So you start walking it up. Why was he a target? And that's where you start at, ladies and gentlemen, on why was Flynn a target of the U.S. government at that time? For what? He was going to be the national security advisor. Can you imagine Susan Rice on the thing, Trump's people targeting Susan Rice before going into Biden thing, saying we're going to open up a major investigation on Susan Rice being a target of a counterintelligence investigation because we think she has collusions with the Russians? This is how bad it is. That's what they did on the thing, which turned out to be all garbage, because the Mueller and the
and Barr,
and the Durham investigations were all the findings were exculpatory. Mm-hmm. So that pretty well tells you. So then you got Tasna Ganner, who we told you about a long time ago. She was the DAG appointed by Holder that was going to be the centerpiece of when they reorganized the whole NS, the National Security Agency. And so she was the focal point for the Hillary Clinton investigation, for all the major stuff, for appointees, for everything. She was the major deal. She was the one that talked Sessions into recusing himself. She was the one that helped out stopping the DA Operation Cassandra case on the Hezbollah that they were working on. So you have all this stuff going on. And also she had personal ties to Page and these folks. So all these people are, like I said, they're all interconnected. They all know each other. Wiseman, her, they're all the same ilk. Next slide. So I put together a timeline, and just to make this to give you, and I'm not gonna. We'll just go through some of these slides real quick because I want to get to the gist of the thing, because we've gone up to August, how they set the meeting up with Trump to brief him. So this will just give you some background. Flynn in 2013, he was made the director, or made his first trip to Russia. He spoke at the gala, and they were already targeting Flynn when Flynn resigned. Stephen Halpern, through that Cambridge initiative, Flynn was already on their radar screen. Okay, that's where that Santa Kovala, the Russian historian, comes into play. She had gone to this. They were trying to set up a dinner and try to make it look like Flynn was having an affair with this Russian historian that worked for MI6. I mean, it's incredible. Yeah, on the thing. But this is how it all starts out, and so they come in from different angles. They come in from they target him first through the NSA stuff. So you've got the Treasury Department unmasking him in 2015, his finances, his stuff. You've got Halpern and these guys on the FBI and the CIA stuff start targeting, putting stories out, getting with the press, with people to start putting out and giving the illusion that Flynn has an affair and could be a possible Russian agent because he went to a dinner and sat near Putin, and so he must be a Russian agent. I mean, think about this. This is pretty sad. Next one. This article here on pretty well says it all. When somebody asked me what role did the media play? Well, the media played a big role in how this comes about, because none of this comes about without the media's help. And Ben Rhodes basically in this article says it all. And this was one of probably the best article, because for the whole time the Obama administration was involved in all this, all these reporters would come to them begging, hey, give us access, whatever. And so it was kind of like, hey, we'd give out the talking points we wanted, and this is how we did it. So they were up front. I have to say these people tell you up front how they're doing it. They're not shy about what they're doing. So all this stuff that you're seeing today in your face on, hey, we're in charge and nothing you can do about it, they were doing this 8 years ago.
Well, John,
Here's a great.
Well, John, today, as we speak, like right now, today, what is it? The 30th of August, 2023. It's a blip on the news and it just goes by because we don't do anything, or our representatives don't do anything. Nothing.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yes. Yeah. So it shows you how they set it up. They were so arrogant. They were so in control of the media. They had meetings. We told you this, I think, in one of the first sessions, that they would have daily meetings at the White House with all the various news. That's why it doesn't happen by happenstance when you turn on your TV and you go from ABC to CBS to all the news channels, whatever, and the same talking points or the same verbiage is being repeated. There's a reason why they do that. It's called, as I said, the big lie theory. Repeat. So then when you believe the lie, you believe it's true.
And it's so fed down to your local networks. Look at your local news, no matter where you are, folks, and just look at what you're seeing, hearing. Okay. Where'd that come from? I mean, it's so slanted. It's not an opinion. It's a fact. It's just,
So let's go. Let's walk you in from the summer. So I told you about the briefing in August. Let's walk you into now. Trump gets elected. Flynn's going to be his national security advisor. Trump meets with Obama. Obama tells him, it warns him about Trump. Why would you? Warns him about Flynn. Why the heck would an incoming or an outgoing president warn an incoming about his national security advisor? Over what? What would be his concerns? I mean, I've never heard of that ever in my entire life. Well, now we know. Okay, they started unmasking Flynn heavily in early November. We showed you that, I think, about 2 podcasts ago. We went through all the unmasking on all the different agencies, from ambassadors in Italy and all the different locations. Now you can see why they were doing that, because all these people were involved in all the different locations, because they were doing operations against General Flynn on the deal. You had Halper in Britain with his Surrogates and the Cambridge deal. Andrew, I forget the guy's name, at the Cambridge Institute with the XMI6 guy doing putting that information out, trying to make it look like Flynn was a Russian agent or could be was associated or had nefarious contacts with the Russians, which was all total garbage. Mm-hmm. Total. I mean, what they did to this man was just deplorable on the thing. Again, he was the one under investigation, and these are the questions that need to be asked: is why? When did they start the investigations on Flynn? Why did they start them? And that'll open this whole can of worms. And that's where they need to start at on there. I could speculate all day long and write you 1,000 different questions that need to be asked. But these are the main points that to unravel this can of worms is you go with the origins, and you start with Brennan. And instead of allowing this garbage for them to say, well, we started the investigations in August based off of Barcock, bullcrap, total garbage. You started a long time ago. Why? What was the purpose? And what was the concerns? And why did you guys have meetings and all that? That's what needs to be done here. If we had some people with some backbone that could do this, it would be one thing. So now let's walk up until, so then we talked about last week, the ICA, the Obama orders the Intelligent Community Assessment Report. And that's important. Why did he do that? Now you can see why he did that, because they needed to have another document to go with the Steele document to be able to get Flynn out of there, because they had to show that how the Russians were the big bad evil guys that were trying to destroy the U.S. elections. They were the guys, they were the responsible party. And that was what it was all about, was to hide all the nefarious stuff that they were doing to set up Team Trump's people for crimes they didn't commit. That's how these people did it. This is not a tough one to solve when you start taking all the timelines, connecting all the dots. You just need to have some investigators start asking the hard questions of the people that were doing the investigation. So let's look at the FBI agents that were doing the cases. The FBI agent investigating Flynn. Well, obviously, he couldn't find anything nefarious about Flynn because he was going to close the case on Flynn. Okay? He submitted his report in to close the case in December. And Strzok got a wind of it and notified Comey and those guys, and they kept the case open. Well, why? As you can see, remember in the IRS agents that testified a couple of weeks ago, they're the duty experts. Your case agents are the ones that tell your prosecutors what the elements of the crime are, what evidence have we discovered. Here's the facts of the case, and that's basically what their jobs are. In this case, you've got the case agent doing his due diligence. He's closing out the case file because he cannot gen up any evidence of any criminal activity or anything to associate General Flynn with any criminality, period. That's the end of the story on the thing. But yet the case file stays open. Why? Why does it stay open? And so it all starts coming together. So you have the conversation, again, it all comes back to the NSA is up on the lines. They listen to Flynn talk to the Russian ambassador on the Kislyak. And what does Comey do at the time? Instead of contacting the White House to get approval to interview Flynn on what did he discuss with Kislyak, which is kind of crazy because here's Flynn, who is an incoming national security advisor, coming in on a new administration, and he doesn't have the right to talk to a foreign counterpart. I mean, this is where people need to take a step back, because if this is the guidelines where the new administration people can't contact their counterparts and have these conversations, well, I guess Kerry and all these other folks, when Obama got elected in 2008, they were already talking to the Iranians way before any of them even got elected. So
John, when you have something in defense of our American audience, hopefully, or wherever, let's just talk about U.S. patriotic Americans. The public doesn't understand that. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm 100%. But really, my neighbors don't understand what you just said. They don't even know.
Well, you're criminalizing a conversation.
Yep.
This is a normal practice of foreign policy between when new administrations come in. This is how business gets done. Mm-hmm. You have the new appointees contacting the ambassadors and having friendly conversations from those standpoints. And what they discuss or what they don't discuss, it doesn't matter. In 2-3 weeks, they're going to be the ones in charge. What does it matter at that point? I mean, really, when you think about it, I mean, they could promise in the moon that nothing can happen until they're in charge. So whatever they say or don't say, it doesn't really matter anyway. It's just That's why you have the handoff between administrations. You want them to go smoothly. Otherwise, your whole foreign policy programs fall apart across the world.
Correct.
I mean, think about it. When you change administrations, ladies and gentlemen, you change it worldwide.
Oh,
So this is on a thing. So let's take a microscope. You get the national incoming appointed national security advisor Flynn contacting the Russian ambassador, having a call, and you've got the FBI sending agents in to find out, did he talk about sanctions? And remember, the sanctions is important because Obama orders the ICA. It's going to be done by the end of December. He puts the 10 Russians or whatever at the end of December on notice, sanctions on the Russians. And that was what this all was about. So when you have the leak of the phone call that Flynn allegedly talked to the Russian ambassador over sanctions, and Obama had put sanctions on him, did he violate the Logan Act? Did he interfere with the and that's how this all comes about. Again, what did I say? Setting up the crime, create the crime when there is no crime. Well, that's what happened here, ladies and gentlemen, on the thing, because the transcripts and everything else exonerate Flynn when all the truth comes out a year later and all this stuff, which is really disappointing. It took that long for all this stuff to come out. But here's the bad part. You had the FBI director struck in a nut, and the case agent go in and interview General Flynn. They don't contact the chief counsel of the White House. They just send the agents in. They go interview Flynn. They take the information, and that becomes now the gist is whether is Flynn lying or telling the truth. And then you have the notes, which are really incredible. Strzok's notes, and then you have Rebecca's supervisor's notes. You have Strzok's notes. We don't think he's lying. We think he believes he's telling us the truth on whatever the transcript said and what he told them. And remember, they're not showing them the transcript. They're not telling them about the call. They're just interviewing. So they've already got they're already 2 steps ahead of the game. On when you're interviewing somebody, you're asking the questions because you're trying to orchestrate a lie. And that's basically why you have, and why Rebecca's notes, the FBI supervisors are so important, were the key parts of this whole thing that came out in his notes. What are we trying to do here? Get him to lie or get him fired? Now think about that. An FBI supervisory executive agent.
Executive, yes.
Okay, these are executives telling, we're trying to get the national security advisor to lie. And that's what they did here, ladies and gentlemen. They came in, they interviewed him over a conversation. They knew in the conversation he didn't talk about sanctions. And there was nothing in the transcripts that he talked about it. They are the ones that generated, given the impression that he did. And then you have the fight between the DOJ attorneys over the notes, and then you had the missing 302, the original.
I was just going to say, John, where's all the 302s? That's the FBI reporting form.
That's right. You had the original 302 between there and the different versions. Then you have Strzok's notes that have come out. There's different versions of his 302s. So you have a whole series as a criminal investigator of agents manipulating reports to make it something.
Which right there is a violation.
It's a crime.
Absolutely.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is what we call a crime.
There you go.
This is why I pull my hair out when I see stuff like the IG and Durham's report, and they say, well, the FBI agents had bad judgment. There's no bad judgment here, ladies and gentlemen. This is intent to frame with as part of a plan to do evil things. It's that simple. I mean, it's that you can't get any more nefarious than this. And all you have to do is look at the actions, the notes, the different communications, the timelines, piece them all together. When did the stories in the press come out? What did they say? And unfortunately, at the time, all the pressure built up in the White House. Trump was a new president, and Pence. People thought that Flynn lied to Pence, and Pence didn't. And so Trump, instead of standing firm and keeping Flynn, he asked for his resignation. That was probably the biggest mistake that Trump made in his lifetime, right there, by listening to Pence. Because now you come to find out that Flynn did not lie to anybody. He was set up. And this is how he was set up by the FBI and by these agents. Okay? It's really a tragic deal. That somebody needs to go in and do a real investigation, bring these people in and ask them the real hard questions, show them their notes. When did you say this? What did you say to them? Why did you say it? Why did you open an investigation? Why did you do this? These are the questions you would normally ask on how did they get to these points. And FBI and the case agent, very simple. Why were you closing your case? Comey, why did you keep the case open? Strzok, what was the purpose for keeping the case open? Well, let's go to the famous, it all comes down to this meeting, the January 5th coup gras meeting, okay? And this is it. At President Obama, Comey, Yates, Biden, and them talking about General Flynn. And this is what precipitates Susan Wright on the day that Trump gets inaugurated. On there, she puts that email out right before they give up power. She writes this email basically covering that meeting, what was said in that meeting. And this is a tragedy. Here you have the President of the United States having a conversation inside the White House on the 5th of February, where the next day that they're going to go and brief the newly elected president, but they're not going to tell him that he's under investigation by the FBI. They're not going to tell him that they're planning on, they're talking about looking at General Flynn for violations of the Logan Act for interfering from there, because that's what they discussed, was how could they charge the Logan Act in that meeting. They were going to follow the book. So you got to ask, they're spying on a president of the United States. They're listening in on an incoming president, on what his team's doing, what he's doing. And this is why you get to where we're at today, why you got a president or a former president indicted on 91 counts of crimes he didn't commit. And that's what I'm saying. It's before you can charge him with any crimes, you need to go back and look at the crimes that these folks put together. This is where the origins start at. And this is where the gist of it comes in at. So that February 5th meeting, you have an outgoing president, tells Comey and them, okay, they do the cover email. That meeting takes place. They brief the next day at up at the Trump Tower on there. Comey takes Trump aside and tells him about the P tape, but he never tells him he's the subject or his team's the subject. Why? He's the incoming president of the United States. He should know what's going on, but he's not told any of this information on there. So if that's not interference of a presidential authority, of an outgoing interfering with an incoming, I don't know what is. Where you're now, the incoming president is now under investigation by the outgoing administration, but you're not going to tell the incoming he's under investigation. That's incredible. I've never, those are the questions that everybody misses in this thing on it. So then you go up to the time you have where Rosenstein appoints Mueller as the special counsel, and you open up the Mueller investigation, and he writes the memos and on there. And in October, he writes a second memo, part of the scope memo, putting Flynn's son in the scope memo on the FARA violation. And that's the pressure to put on Flynn to roll over to take a plea. So when people ask, well, why did Flynn take a plea? Well, Flynn took a plea to protect his son because they knew that they didn't register under the FARA Act. And he didn't want to have his son have an exposure, so his dad took the bullet for his son. It's that simple. And then you had where all the exculpatory information, he hires a new set of attorneys. The ones that representative had tie-ins to Holder's people, so they got rid of those attorneys. And he brought in Cindy Powell, and that's when you had the famous logjam between her and Judge Sullivan in the courts and the appellate court with the President Attorney General on making the rulings that they made, where you had exculpatory information, where you actually had the DOJ saying this thing needs to go away because you have all this exculpatory information that Flynn did not create a crime. He pled to a non-crime. It wasn't a crime. And that was the whole situation, ladies and gentlemen, on it. They as the FBI supervisor agency stated well, we're here to frame him or get him fired. And it was to get him to be fired. Get him out of the way. Neuter him. So I hope, ladies and gentlemen, you get a clear picture today of this whole thing. Is there any more slides left? Just go through the rest of them.
You have a couple on here if you want to. You talked.
Yeah, just roll through them so they can have them up on the
CO2s. We talked about the resignation.
Yeah.
A New York Magazine. Different articles, intelligence articles.
Yeah, that gives them a timeline. They can go back and look at the slides themselves.
All these articles, ladies and gents, you can all look at this, pull them up, the American Thinker. You can pull up all these. And John has the date. He has the year on it for you. Sarah Carter, New York Times, the Federalist, again, the American Thinker. And tell me when to stop, John. We're all the way up.
Just get all the slides out on there so they can go back, and then all the slides are on the thing so they can go back and they can pull them off the slideshow.
Okay. It's all there. Real good stuff. Do some homework on your own, like we always say. But boy, I tell you, hearing it today and hearing it from my comrade here, John, and now I realize what we didn't know, what the public didn't know. Wow. Well,
what the public didn't know, Brian, and this is what gets me. I watch this whole goat show every day. I watch all the pundits get on the thing and talk. I watch all these guys that did some great research work, and we really did. The Sarah Carters, the John Solomons, the Paul Sperrys, the Technofog people, there's been there's a ton of these guys that have done some great individual work on the internet. They're on their own, and really good work. However, it's all piecemeal.
Yes.
And it's not brought together on how it all comes together to make it simplified. And really, ladies and gentlemen, it all comes together. This is a real simple. This is not a complex matter, ladies and gentlemen. The question that everybody in the Congress needs to start asking is, when did the investigations of the Team Trump people really begin? That's all. It's all out there.
John, I'm surprised that nobody from Mr. Trump's legal team has not reached out to you. because you're right. Whenever audience, myself and John talking back and forth, once he started convincing me that this is a pretty legal case, I'm sorry, pretty simple case. Actually, when you look back at all the indicia that you've seen so far and what John has coming in the next 2 weeks, it's right there. It's right there. John, I want to comment on something you said about to the audience about when you change a country's administrative top, right? And then it affects the world globally.
Yeah.
Ladies and gents, this week in the Wall Street Journal, this is the fact, WSJ. I can't cite the exact date. It was earlier in the week. There was an article about how the rest of the world is bracing, listen to this, I'm paraphrasing, is bracing for Donald Trump to win the next election. Now think about that for a second. The rest of the world. Go back and pull it up. It's out there. It's this week.
Well, they have to, because as you can see, Brian, what we're presenting and what we've presented for the last 7 weeks, the amount, I really believe this, and this is how I want to coach it. This is all about money, power, and staying in power, getting your agenda, your ideological agenda. But really, it all starts out with the money part. How did all these people enrich themselves? You got 3 commonalities. You've got the Clinton Foundation, the Obamas enriching themselves, the Bidens enriching themselves. What did they do? How did these people go in the government service with X amount of dollars and come out with gigantic amount of dollars? I mean, you and I have worked in government service. It doesn't happen that way.
I mean, General Flynn was wiped out essentially when it was all said and done. Am I not right? Okay, wasn't he? Wasn't he like?
Yeah, he was totally wiped out.
Hey,
yeah.
What I don't understand. This is my view through my glasses, and probably yours too, John. Just what you said. How does the president of the United States currently act like he's a lunch bucket union guy when he's got estates everywhere?
Yeah.
Is anybody using their brain? Now, Donald Trump, granted, was a businessman, alleged. That's not my opinion, or yours. But I'm saying that, okay, we know the world that he came from. There's books on it. Go read them. I did back in the day. But
he gave his salary back to the government.
Nobody mentions that. Nobody mentions that.
He gave his $240,000 being paid as president
or net, John, I think
to charities back to the government. He didn't take a dime his whole 4 years. So almost $1 million he gave back. He didn't take. He gave back.
John,
that's all I'm saying.
To the choir,
and that's all I'm saying is this is common sense, ladies and gentlemen.
It really is.
And people need to take a step, and you need to start realizing, how does this all come about? How did we get to this silly point? How did you get sold a bill of goods that the FBI got somehow hoodwinked by Steele and these clown show? I mean, come on.
Well, I'll say this, John, and I don't know where I saw it or heard it, but if you're sitting on the couch and thinking that doesn't happen here, that's over there, no, because next year, ladies and gents, it's happening in your neighborhood.
Oh, it's gonna
schools, your places of worship, the car you drive. What do they come up this week? They want to talk about you limit the liquor you can drink for 2. In the United States, didn't we have prohibition failure?
They have basically unmasked themselves, saying we're in charge, nothing you can do, and we're gonna roll over you. And that's why when I saw Mark Levin last Sunday and Newt Gingrich on his show, for the first time, I actually saw fear in their eyes. Were we asleep at the switch? How did we allow this to happen?
I'm sorry.
And that's where we've all been, asleep at the switch. Wake up, America. You've been played. Time to go out. You can still make a difference. This election isn't over with yet. Get your folks, get your whatever, get anybody that loves America You only have A or B, freedom versus tyranny, your choice. That's how I'll leave it.
Is that your closing?
That's my closing.
Okay. I want to just want to kudos to John again. He has a Substack. It was out, and John, they get to the Substack by using your name, John Seaman.
Yeah, just go on there. It's on there. It's free articles.
Okay, and Freedom versus Tyranny, August 23rd, 2023. John, it says 2:03 a.m. Were you writing at that time? I know you're on there.
Yep.
Is it close to me? John doesn't sleep. He's Dracula. Well, ladies and folks, man and gents, whatever that means these days, peace. We're losing it by the day, which, Lord have mercy. Love, you got to have some of that. But again, I don't think everybody buys that program. You got to have a lot of strength, man. Ain't no doubt about it. But you know what the three of those things equal? The F word, freedom. You lose your freedom, you're done. You're done. And at our age, in our upper years, we really see it. So thank you very much, John. I really appreciate it.
You got it, Brian. We'll catch you next week.
Take care, everybody.